Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. This is a podcast to inspire, uplift, show forth the love of God, and help usher in the spiritual awakening. Welcome to Inspire Me with Jay. I'm your host, Jay Spillers, author and teacher. I have a special guest today. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Callaghan. I'm an author, a writer. I write about what I learned in my near-death experience and from my lifelong relationship with my guide, who has always had me call him Michael. I have a nescient podcast of my own. It's only been around 6 or 8 months, maybe longer. Let's see, what else? Oh, I'm a channel for my guide. And that's how we write our books. We have two series. One is fiction, and it's erotic literary fiction and fantasy, and it teaches all the same lessons that you can learn from our nonfiction series. The first of which is up, called Rise in Lucidity and Master Anxiety. And the second one, which we're in production of now, should be up by the end of February. It's called Master Your Mind and Ascend. So that's me. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and almost 2 years in master's level core courses in interdisciplinary natural sciences, in case anybody cares about my education. So I'm not entirely nutty. I am a scientist.
Mm-hmm. So, what
it's good to meet
happened
you, Jay.
In terms? Yeah, it was good to meet you too.
Yeah.
So,
thanks.
what happened
Thanks
in
for
terms of
asking me
your
to be on.
near-death experience? Oh,
Okay,
you're welcome.
It's great to be here. At the age of 20, I got myself killed. I'd like to give you a tiny bit of background of why that happened and how that happened. From the age of 5, I was aware that I had a constant companion who told me I could call him Michael. He was a presence, a being, a sentience that entered my mind space and showered my form and my mind, my consciousness with, like I call chi resonance flows. They are, your body scintillates all over with frisson. I felt like I was just angels dancing all over my skin, or electric dancing all over me. And it was euphoric and beautiful. And that's how he always came to me, with all this outpouring of love and bliss. And many times I would just not be in my body anymore. When Michael showed up, I would be in what we refer to as an ecstasy. I was elsewhere, outside of space-time, usually in a misty, pleasantly lit environment. And there were beautiful beings there I took to be angels, but they looked really more like birds, but they were jewel-like and scintillated. In any case, so I had this companion, and every afternoon in the summertime, when I grew up in Florida, we didn't have AC, no air conditioning, so I would climb the trees in the summer afternoons when the heat was rippling off the tar shingle rooftops, and I knew nobody was going to sleep unless we got it to cool down, and I would climb up the trees and I would sing to the sky, believing that if I sang beautifully enough and with enough passion, that my song would be accepted as an offering and it would induce rain. God would rain for me. And then it would cool everything down and we could all sleep. Because we didn't have AC, it was the only way it was going to get cooled down, is if I got it to rain. So I did this almost every day in the summer, all the time I was growing up, from 5 or 6 until I was 15. And at the age of 15, I was watching my favorite weathercaster talk about something called the Bermuda High. And the Bermuda High is a weather system, very predictable, very stable and steady in the summertime, sets up over Bermuda, high pressure, and the returning winds around that high pressure bring the storms to Tampa, where I grew up, every day almost in the summer, between 3 and 7 at night, 3 in the afternoon and 7 at night. So as he explained this, I suddenly realized that I had had, or at least my shift in perception went from being the little kid who thought I was causing, with the help of God, the evening rain to come, to suddenly being a scientist and saying, wait a minute, I probably had nothing to do with the storms at all. It was probably that Bermuda High thing. So at that point, literally, right then and there, I became disillusioned with religion, with church, with the whole thing. And I decided that everybody in my family but Daddy had been saying that Michael was just an imaginary friend. So I decided that Michael was probably just an imaginary friend. I hadn't been causing the rain at all. So I became an empiricist, and all of the magic drained out of my life. I was no longer enchanted with the world. And so I started doing a lot of risky things, as cryptically desperate people often will. And that's how I got myself killed at the age of 20. I stopped listening to Michael. He would still talk to me, although he didn't talk with words. He talked with knowing and with images and with memories and with a language of the heart, I would say. And if ever you've heard that still small voice, you know what I'm talking about. So I went out this day. I was supposed to go riding with a friend of mine, and there were two horses, and one was a mare that liked to be ridden. Her name was Ticker. And the other was a stallion, and I can't remember his name, but he was quite large. He was 17 hands, 17.2 actually. And he didn't like anybody riding him, really. He certainly didn't like me. But I had forgotten to bring the grain to lure him into the paddock so I could catch him. And Ticker, the mare, was easy to catch. She was a barrel mare and very maneuverable and fast. And so I thought, what I'll do is I will ride Ticker, and I will haze with Ticker, the stallion, into the smaller paddock where I'll be able to catch him. And my friend who was with me, Tammy, said, I don't think that's a good idea. And I didn't listen to her. And Michael internally said, not a good idea, not safe. And I didn't listen to him. And I whirled about on that horse. She just whoosh. And we charged after the stallion, probably the very worst way to go about it. Anyway, the horse picked up my intention, and away we went. Now I'm in a fairly hard gallop behind the stallion, very close, standing more or less in the stirrups, so the seat keeps smacking me in the bottom every time she strides. And I got my face down close to her neck, and everything slips into slow motion. And I realize when Michael says internally, he's kicking. And I said, so what? He can't really get me up here. Boy, was I wrong. He kicked me, a glancing blow right here in the face, but I never felt it because I wasn't in my body. As everything was in slow motion, and as I'd left my body so many times in my life, I just did it involuntarily, but just like that when it happened. I just rolled to the left out of my body and suddenly was about 100, maybe a little more, feet away, watching as in slow motion, the stallion kicked the body here in the face, and the head snapped back, and the arms let go, and the body went limp because it was knocked out. And it fell backwards onto the rump of the mare, and the mare ran, and for about 3 strides, the body flopped on the rump. And I'm watching it and thinking, geez, I hope her foot doesn't get caught in that stirrup and she get dragged. But I was totally dispassionate about the whole thing. And the foot didn't get stuck, and the body came down on its head and neck on this side. And then the hips hit and the legs hit and the dust lifted off in slow motion. And suddenly I was in a lustrous vast. And it was like velvet, and it had a sheen of like gasoline in the water in the sunshine. And I felt perfect. I felt really perfect, like the way God had made me perfect. I don't mean I just felt good. I mean, I felt perfect. And I said, I'm perfect. Nothing can ever hurt me again. And suddenly Michael was there, and he said, nothing could have ever hurt you to begin with. You're an eternal being. And for a moment, there was recognition between us. And I said, it's you. Well, of course, you know, it made sense that it would be him. Anyway, so I said, I could taste the truth. There's a very weird thing that my field resonated with him. So I knew he was telling me the truth. I could feel it in my own being that he was telling me the truth. And it was a lot like tasting chemically the electromagnetics of his field. Anyway, and that's how I recognized him too, his field. I recognized it. So I said, well, if that's true, nothing could have ever hurt me to begin with because I'm an eternal being, then why was it all so scary? And he said, oh, it was scary because you believed you could suffer loss and die. And we intensified the experience in that venue so that it was you were operating under that assumption that you could suffer loss and die, because intensifying it kept you from disbelieving in it. If we hadn't intensified it, you wouldn't have fallen for it. Basically, you wouldn't have believed, because the very first thing I've noticed at this point is the world is just a dream. Just the way you waken from a bad dream and you go, oh, thank goodness I exist. My reality springs from a higher level and nothing in the dream can hurt me. That's exactly what dying was like. Boop. I was up at this higher level of my presence, my own being, a higher level of reality where nothing in the world could have even touched me, much less sullied me. So it had happened in an entirely conceptual environment, my whole life experience. So anyway, so he says, because you believed you could suffer loss and die, etc. And he said, we had to do that because if we hadn't, you wouldn't have learned what you went there to learn, and you wouldn't have done what you went there to do. And I said, I don't remember what that is. Can you tell me? Can you remind me? And he said, you went to summon your will. And I said, what? I went through all of that suffering to learn what I wanted? And he said, no, you misunderstand what I mean by the will. I have to show you. So suddenly, I'm no longer in the lustrous past. I'm an 18-month-old baby laying on the floor, screaming and pitching a tantrum because I feel like I've been tied to the floor since my mother just put on me my very first pair of brand new shoes. They were tight and uncomfortable. I hated them. And I thought it was something terribly bad. And I was reacting horrifically. I was just being a total bore. I was really going at it. And poor mom, at the same time I was being me on the floor, I was observing all of this too. Backed away from it, so to speak. And I was being my mother. I was perceiving through her feelings. And she was thinking, my poor baby, I saved up money, we were a poor family, to get these shoes for her. She needs them because the yard's full of stickers. She's always getting, stickers in her feet. And here she is really upset. How am I going to protect her feet? And at this moment, I realized, oh, mom was really pleased to give me those shoes. She thought she was doing something great. And it kind of hurt her feelings that I received the shoes the way I did. And I just really took a beautiful thing that she was trying to do for me and an accomplishment. And I turned it into something really bad because of the way I labeled it and decided what it meant to me. So suddenly, boom, with that realization, I'm back in the lustrous past, and I say to Michael, did I get that right? Did I take what was a good thing and by my labeling make it a bad thing? And he said, that's exactly what you did. Yes. And it's a pattern. But wait, there's more. Suddenly, whoosh, I'm a 5-year-old. And this is a very delicate thing, but I was being sexually assaulted by my granduncle, and I was fighting with him. And when this had happened, at the time that it had actually happened in the dream of the world, I left my body, okay, so that I wouldn't be present for the situation. And so here I am revisiting it, and I'm being who I was. I'm observing the whole situation, and I'm also being me as I leave my body. So it's like there were kind of almost two of me created by this perspective. So, and I realize at that instant that Michael is there with me. I realize myself as a 5-year-old, I experienced being a 5-year-old, realizing Michael is there during this event. When it actually happened, he was there. And I'm remembering discovering that, oh my God, I have this constant companion who is magnificent and loving and can take me out of any upset whatsoever and make me in bliss. This is beautiful. I wasn't paying any attention at all to the child who was being assaulted. That child's spirit was me and was with me in this place that was kind of like misty with pleasant, gentle light with those jeweled beings I mentioned earlier. So I look at this and I go, oh my God, I took what was horrific that was happening in the dream of the world. And because I focused on Michael's presence and those jeweled beings and the bliss of being with them, because that's where I put my attention and my labeling, that's the meaning I assigned to it. What happened to me was I met this being. What happened to me wasn't I was sexually assaulted and met this being. My focus was entirely what was happening on earth did not matter. So I took this horrific thing that most people would, and the way I lived it, it was something beautiful. And suddenly, whoosh, I'm back with Michael in the lustrous fast. And I said, did I take a horrific thing and turn it into a magnificent thing just by the way I labeled it and where I put my attention? And he says that, yeah, that's exactly what you did. So there were like 2 more little vignettes like this in my life, and they all were the same repeat of those themes. As you see a thing, as you label the thing, you will experience it. As you choose based on your self-talk and your past conditioning in the world, as you choose to see a thing and label it, you're going to experience. It's going to mean that to you. So if you can consciously, we all do this all the time. We're just unconscious that we're not observing ourselves when we're labeling something and creating that experience for us. Okay. So this is, to me, I'm looking at this and I go, this is amazing. What we are doing is we are creating a world with our own self-talk, creating an experience, and then blaming the experience and the world we're creating for making us unhappy. So this was very funny because we are disavowing our power by the power of our own vow, because we're godlings. Now, I really start to laugh over this, and Michael laughs with me because it's a really kind of a gauche jest. We're playing a trick on ourselves. It's a prank. This is now I won't say it's a simulation. It's something in an energetic field in which we're all joined, in which our thoughts all influence the field, and our feelings echo our thoughts. So what you're saying to yourself creates your field around your body, and that field affects the huge field that we're all in together, jointly creating this experience at the macro level, and individually creating our own subjective experience at the micro level. Okay. So after we laughed and laughed and laughed about how what we're doing is ridiculous because we're gods pretending we're not in charge of everything that's happening to us. Okay. Then suddenly I realized that because all that labeling is happening unconsciously instead of consciously, like you just decide to exercise your godly estate, take control of your self-talk and your subjective experience. Instead, it's happening unconsciously. So what we're doing is we're creating what we dread instead of manifesting what we desire. So we're not acting on our will. So now I start to weep. And I weep with Michael because this error of unconscious creation, disavowing our power by the power of our vow, causes all the suffering in the world. And if we could just be conscious of what we're doing, of our self-talk and how we're rendering our own experience and jointly creating this together, if we could be conscious instead, we could create the paradise that we all deserve as godlings, in peace, living together harmoniously and happy. Okay? So this made me weep because we can only do this because we are godlings. We can only fool ourselves this way because of our immense power. And at this point, I'm becoming a larger version of myself. It's like the longer I was there, the more I began to remember me, the real me that transcends this temporal character I appear to be in the dream of the world. And as I remember myself, everything of the earth, the conditioning that made me imperfect, falling more and more away as I'm shifting identification to my transcendent eternal self. And I realize that millions of us have on a huge team of spirits have come into Earth venue through time. This was 1978, and I saw a bell curve in my mind, and it was through time the number of people who had come in to help in the Earth's shift, the number of souls who had come here to help. And I loved them. I couldn't yet remember them individually, but I knew them all, that we'd been eternal together forever. And I knew them and I loved them and I wanted to be with them. I knew they were going to succeed in our mission, which is the will that is wholly shared. It's wholly shared by all creation, so it's considered the will that is holy. It's otherwise referred to as the dream of awakening. People talk about the shift. Nobody really tells you what the awakening is or looks like and what the shift is, but I saw what it was and what it is, what they both are. And I was filled with this love and compassion for my team. And I just wanted to be with them, even though I knew they succeed without me, because God wills, this is God's will for this planet. And I said, I've got to go back, Michael. I've got to go back and tell everybody that tiny mistake we're making of not being conscious of how we're using our words, spelling, speaking, we're casting spells over our own experience, how we're not being conscious of it. And so instead of manifesting through manifestation what we will, we are actually unconsciously summoning what we dread with our self-talk. We're not paying attention. And when we do pay attention, we don't control it. We let ourselves speak our grievances and speak into being things we're afraid of. And, we speak rashly. Okay. So, and we think rashly. So anyway.
You're listening to the Inspire Me with Jay podcast. Please do like and subscribe to the channel. Bringing hope and inspiration to the world.
I said, Michael, I have to go back. I have to go back and tell them. But the world's just a dream. How do I get back into the dream? And he said, well, you've already gone back into the dream several times. When I took you from the lustrous vast in your life review. And you can go back into the dream any place you want. You can go into the future and pick it up. Doesn't make any difference. You can go back to the moment before the horse kicked you and you can avoid the accident. But if you do that, you won't remember anything you learned here because you'll be living a different time stream, a different event cascade in which it never happened. So it can't be remembered from within that context. So I said, he said, you have to go back in if you want to remember. And that's the reason you want to go back. Nothing is secret in the lustrous vast. You have to go back in through the last moment because the last moment contains nested within it like Russian dolls, every event, every antecedent condition that led you to that point in time. And then you summon your will to be in the dream. And so that's what I did. I didn't expect it to work the very first time. I still wasn't fully centered that I'm a godling, and if I will it, it will occur. I thought I would have to try it a few times, and it didn't work that way at all. The very moment I put my attention on the horse's rump rising in front of me and felt the horse under me and heard the hooves hitting the ground, the very moment I thought of that and willed to be there, whoosh, I was back in the body, and the body was laying on the ground, and I started trying to get back up right away. Now, the reason I started trying to get back up right away is because right before I said, I've got to go back, I said, this is so clear and amazing. What you've just showed me about what we're doing to ourselves. It makes so much sense. I must be dying. Am I dying? And he said, well, your body is laying on the ground in that paddock, and if you don't make it stand up, it will cease from brain swelling because of the head trauma. So when I got back in the body, the very first thing I started trying to do was get the body up off of the ground. And when I did, and it took 3 tries with the help of the girl that was there with me to horseback ride, Tammy, she helped me get up. She didn't want me to get up, but I told her I had to get up. I have to get up. Because Michael said I'll die if I don't. I didn't say that, but and the body was in a very bad state. It was, I could hardly walk. And that went on for about 8 months, not able to walk very much because I had to stop and vomit every few strides because of vertigo. And I had no ability to learn anything new for like 18 months. And then one afternoon, I was sitting on the back porch using some cannabis for the vertigo and the nausea. It helped a lot. And I said to God, look, I used to have a really great brain, great mind, and now I can't learn things. I don't know what you can do with me in this state, but I've always wanted to serve you. You know, I've told you over and over again that I love your world, and I want to help you restore it. And if you, for however you can use me, I'm yours. Well, it took about 3 days. It may have been just 2, but I'm thinking it was about 3 days. And I began having flashbacks of the day the accident I got kicked, kids from school back in grade school, etc. As my brain began to build new neural networks really quickly, and it was recovering memories in a different sensory modalities than I had. It was getting the data for the memories through different sensory modalities than I normally used. Wasn't normally a very visual person at that stage, but I was having a lot of visual flashbacks, and I would hear the kids' voices and know their names and have little snippets of days in school with them and things that happened with them, just replay like in little flashbacks in my mind. So over the course of the next, I'd say 6 months, my memory stitched itself back together much better than it was before. I returned to college and I finished my bachelor's in psychology very quickly. And I had been a med student before. So it was starting a new major, but it took less than 2 years for me to finish the psych degree requirements. And then in 1989, I had met a man like a year, maybe 14 months before. Very nice man. And Michael said, you shouldn't marry him. When he asked me to marry him in 89, I said, I wanted to do it. And Michael was like, you shouldn't marry him. And he's a very nice guy, but he's not your husband. I'm your husband. Okay. In eternity, I am your husband. And I promised you when you came into time that there were things that you were going to do that we agreed you would do. And I promised, you made me promise, in fact, that I would see that you got them done so you didn't have to come back into the venue again. And this particular gentleman will not be really on board with what it is you want to do. But I told Michael something I thought I'd never say. I said, leave me be. And so he always respects me. And so he certainly couldn't leave me, because you can't be apart from what you're a part of. But he became silent. And I would only hear from him when I was in imminent physical danger. And as I was a professional nitrox technical diver at the time, I was regularly in imminent physical danger. So I did hear from him, but otherwise very quiet. 6 years went by. I've been married that time. And I came home. I'd gone back to school. I came home from final exams. I was working on the interdisciplinary natural sciences bit. And I had been awake for 3 days cramming for final exams. And I was really sleepy. And my brain was working in that strange way it does when you're sleep deprived. And I came in and grabbed a beer and sat down and kicked off my shoes. And I was thinking, well, what am I going to do with my summer? Have a little beer. And I think I'll probably do some diving. God knows Bob wants to dive every weekend, so we'll probably do some diving. But I'll apply for grad school for spring semester. And, this is the way I'm thinking, when suddenly my tailbone thumps 3 times. Thump, thump, thump. Weirdest feeling I've ever felt. Never felt that before. Weird thumping sensation. Wasn't in the muscles or anything. It was somewhere in between. It's strange. Anyway, suddenly my body's standing in frisson, all the hair all over my form, and I'm like this. And I'm going, wow, what's this about? It feels like Michael. And Michael says, and this is the first time he ever spoke to me using words. Literally heard him like you hear a song inside your head that won't stop playing. He said, go in and boot up the word processor. And I'm like, glug, glug, glug. This is surprising. No way. I'm not going in there to boot up that computer. I've been doing reports for the last month. My wrists are sore. I've got carpal tunnel. My elbows hurt. Just not going to do it, Michael. I'm going to drink this beer and take a shower and go to bed. And I thought I told you to leave me be. So glug, 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 a little more beer. And all of a sudden, the tailbone thumps 3 times. And this wave that came out of the tailbone rushes up my spine, hits the inside of my skull, and bounces back down. And I'm like, just on the edge of my seat. What has just happened? Because I'm just lit up with frisson. What has just happened? And Michael barges into consciousness again and says, go boot up the word processor. And I'm not going to do it. And I drank some more beer. I've already told you it's not happening. This is the first time he's ever just not respected what I had said. Thump, thump, thump goes the tailbone again, and he lights me up again, and the energy rushes up my spine, bounces, bump, down into the tailbone, bounces back up, down into the tailbone, bounces back up, and I am breathless with this experience and reeling. And Michael says to me quite distinctly, as if I could feel him felt like he was leaning down over me to speak softly in my ear, but he had this tone. Go boot up the word processor. I have a story to tell you. I promise it'll be a great adventure. And I'm just like on fire. I go in and sit down and boot up the word processor. When your guide speaks to you that clearly, you just want to do what they're asking of you. There's really little way around it. And in I went and booted up the word processor, and the words began to flow through my mind like a song that won't stop playing in your head. And so we started writing together. And at that point, I became basically Michael's scribe. And started channeling him. So that's the evolution of our relationship when I was 36. And since then, it's evolved quite a bit, but I've been blathering for a while now, so I'll hush up and see if you have any questions.
So it's kind of like you're talking about, like in meditation, it's kind of like a redirected focus where you go from the negative and traumatic to a positive. And sometimes, like in meditation, you'll go from like a negative to a neutral to start with, like breath, but then you go into a positive about love and peace and finding joy. And that's is that sort of the shift you're talking about in terms of
This shift.
the awakening
Okay.
is redirecting your focus to a new paradigm?
So polarity or duality is we see everything as good or bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good or bad. But it's not
Mm-hmm.
about just changing your mind to talk to yourself about what is good. That's not where the mojo is. That's just the practice that makes you grok the mojo. The important bit is not that you just change your experience by changing your self-talk. The important bit is that you are the one who is looking. You're the observer who is looking at good and bad. You are the observer who chooses good or bad. The focus of identification comes out of your self-talk, out of the self-talk, and becomes identified with the observer. The important bit and the chooser, the important bit is that that is who and what you are. Okay, you're not your body, not your possessions, not your roles, not your principles or your missions, no matter how noble, they do not define you. You're not your backstory. You're not your circumstances. You're not your mind that attacks your peace. You are the consciousness who has the job of learning to supervise your mind so that you get an experience of your godly estate, and that is being the consciousness. Your godly estate is accessed, all the power of your eternal being is accessed through the ability to make those choices and observations. And what you want to do is make the choices and the observations in order to shift the identification to being the observer, being the chooser. That's your godly estate. That's how nothing out there working with you cannot rest with imaginary arms of flesh, happiness from a world that is not outside you. We are creating that world as a projection of our self-talk. Okay, so you get to your godly estate, to the bliss of your power and being at peace. You get to that through practicing, observing, and choosing your self-talk. That causes you to shift identification to the godly estate of consciousness itself, conscious of itself. If you abide in that, especially when you're suffering, suffering should instantly waken you. And that's what Michael, he taught me to lucid dream as a child. He reminded me in 2007, he reminded me of how the world was just a dream during my NDE. He gave me this huge revelation, showered me with the bliss again, and said, now I'm telling you, anytime you suffer, you have lost your lucidity in the dream of the world. You are regarding yourself to be the temporal character you play in the dream of the world. You are regarding yourself to be the product of your past and your self-talk. You are not seeing yourself as your godly self, your eternal self, having this temporal. You need to remember your godly self, your eternal self from within the dream of the world. All my life, he had been teaching me to lucid dream, and I was like, why can't I just wake up from a nightmare? And he said, because you have to stay in the dream to change it. You have to stay in there to change it. Well, I was always just popping out. I used to bilocate and leave my body all the time. So he was like, you have to stay in the dream to change it, because only a lucid dreamer can change the dream. Turns out summoning my will is summoning the will that is wholly shared, the dream of awakening. That's why it's called the awakening. People wake up lucid in the dream of the world. They realize, they remember their greater context from within the smaller context of the world dream. And that allows us to observe our self-talk and the way we're creating unconsciously what we dread and do not want, instead of consciously, as consciousness itself, conscious of itself, choosing what we will to manifest individually and together. So that's what awakening refers to. That's what the shift refers to. Shifting from being identified with your feelings and your self-talk and your grievances and your whatever you talk to yourself about when nobody's around. You're summoning all the emotions with that self-talk, and you're not watching yourself do that to yourself. You're not watching yourself work yourself up. And that's what you do. You shift to being the watcher, watching you, the little self, talking itself into a leather or into despair. And you then shifting, changing. First, you ask about your self-talk. What am I saying to myself with these emotions? Okay. Is it true? I mean, really put it into words very carefully. You'll know it'll click when you've got it into words. Yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. Okay. Right. So is it true? Is it really true? Is it fair to everyone involved? Lastly, if there's even a shred of truth to it, is it serving you? Is it serving the world you say you love? Is it serving the God you say you love? What are you adding to the field? What vibes are you adding to the field? You're attached to everything here. What are you doing to the field? And when are you going to wake up out of identification with all of that stuff that's making you suffer and take responsibility for building jointly together the experience we all want, heaven on earth? So that's the shift, and that's the awakening.
Yeah, that does sound a lot like, it does sound a lot like what we do in meditation, where you kind of become the bystander, you observe things, you can ask questions, you can see, does this serve me? Those kind of things, and you become aware. So, I mean, is that like a practice you do as part of what you're doing? Is meditation to kind of
chronically? No, I every morning and every night as I'm going to sleep, I meditate, and as I'm waking up, I meditate. Okay, but I don't like reserve. Other than those 2 times, I want meditation, this observation of the self-talk and the way I'm creating my own experience. I want that to be constant. That's what it has to be. If we're going to summon together, we have to stay constantly in that state. If we're going to recreate and summon, the will that is wholly shared is that everyone become lucid in the dream of the world, so that they can change the dream. Only a lucid dreamer can change the dream. And, it's our beliefs of being limited in this environment that create the experience of being limited in this environment. We create a world to which we appear to be hostage and disempowered, and yet we created the world. We created it. We create it on the fly constantly. We're just not aware of it. And this is how we become aware of it, by doing that meditation you described. Constantly be the observer of what you're saying to yourself. Constantly take unwavering responsibility, unqualified responsibility for what you're adding to the field. Does it serve you? Does it serve God? Does it serve peace? Does it serve love? Is it serving humanity? And that's what we have to do. I mean, this is exactly what Earth Venue teaches us not to do, is to cooperate and do this sort of thing. And instead, we do the natural human physical body thing and get scared and upset and hostile, etc. So that is what we have to rise out of. We have to, before we can change it, we have to observe ourselves doing it. Do you see where I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm. Do you still sometimes catch yourself getting caught up in the emotions, angry, sad, frustrated, and it's just, you just sort of have to catch yourself?
Every time I do that, Michael, that's what Michael showed me in 2007. Use it as a token. When you're lucid dreaming, you have a token, something that makes you become lucid in the dream. And for me, there were 2 tokens. One was fear. Every time I felt fear, I knew I had a body someplace else. in another world that was experiencing fear. Okay. And that would make me lucid. Or if I was flying in a dream or doing something other supernatural, it would make me lucid. I'd go, oh, look at this. I'm dreaming. This is great. I can do cool stuff. Right. All right. So just in the same way in the world, the dream of the world, which presently I saw this too when I was dead. This is the dream of the sons and daughters of God captive to the world they made. The will that is wholly shared is the dream of awakening, in which the sons and daughters of God all become lucid, observing the ways they've been creating unconsciously what they do not want instead of consciously what they do want. Okay, so that is what many of us came here to do, but we all want it because it's how we create heaven on earth. It's how we get our heart's desire. Even though we think we want to be vindicated for our grievances and our self-talk and our theories proven always right, okay, in order to be happy. We think that's what that'll make me happy. I want all that, okay? Really, you have to set all of that stuff aside to allow yourself to be happy. You have to disidentify it and with it and be in your godly estate of, I know I create that stuff for myself as a reality when I relate to the world that way and I talk to myself that way.
Have you ever wondered whether the Bible was compatible with a near-death experience? In my book, Heaven's Truth, the parallels between the Bible and the near-death experience, your faith will be strengthened while you support this channel. In Heaven's Truth, you will learn about near-death experiences and other similar experiences in the Bible. Support for the Bible contained in NDEs. A central theme that runs through both the Bible and NDEs. How the NDE brings the Bible to life for these modern times. Evidence for both the Bible and the NDE, and much more. Great book. Spillers does an excellent job weaving the relationship between NDEs and the scriptures. 5 stars on Amazon, available on Amazon. Do you think more people today are becoming aware or lucid?
Oh, yeah.
Is there a greater awakening going on right now?
Yeah, there really is. And the thing is because we create the limitations of the venue collectively with our belief system, we also emancipate ourselves collectively from the belief system of limitation. So the ones who are becoming awake are they realize they're at the edge of their godly estate. They start to see their ability to affect both their private experience and their joint experience with their self-talk and their attitude. Okay. They see this happening. And so the venue, which is conscious and tries to protect us from the rashness of our usual self-talk. And it does this by slowing down the rate of our manifestation. So we feel disempowered. Everything manifests slowly for us. That's to give us time to realize we're at cause, we're the ones doing it, and change our minds. Okay. But as more people wake up and know their belief structure is, yeah, I'm affecting the world, I'm making it rain, so it cools things down. Okay. As more people come into that experience, the venue begins to respond to and reflect that too. At the point you get, and so things begin to manifest much more quickly. Okay. So we're at a critical point right now, which is why everything seems so crazy. It's crazy because enough of us are awake and knowing about the power of what we speak into being. All right, that the earth venue is now escalating the rate of manifestation of what we dread, what other people unconsciously dread, and what we as awakened beings still in our little lizard brains fear. Okay, so it's more important now, more important than ever, that we get a grip on it, that we awaken to the fact that we're this observer out here. We're not either side. The point is this. Not just choose nice self-talk. Nice self-talk. Don't just choose nice self-talk. Observe yourself doing it. Abide in the awareness of being consciousness itself, conscious of what you're creating. How are you affecting the field? Okay. That's what you need to focus on. So if anybody gets in, that was a message overall from my NDE, which it has a lot more intricacy and layers to it, because this NDE, like many, the stuff that Michael shows me is like it drops into my head. They're like idea bombs, and they drop into mind space, and they open like a flower with multiple layers of intricate understandings. It's sort of just like a pop-up card, only it pops up in multiple directions. And it takes, over time, it's just exploded inside my head with the relevance of everything that he showed me, and especially in the context of what I've been learning my whole life. At 66 years old, I look back now and I understand why he kept telling me I have to stay in the dream to change it. Don't just eject, because I have a tendency to eject. And after the NDE and being in his presence and showered with so much love, I don't relate to myself as this being anymore. So there's a natural inclination to want to go, especially with everything the world's going through. I'm just like, there's a natural inclination to say, I'd rather be in the eternal again. So now I'm teaching myself more and more to visit the eternal perspective from within the temporal perspective, so that I get the refreshing spiritually that I need in order to continue to deliver this message right now, when it is absolutely critical.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that's sort of all of our missions then, is to awaken and then to help others awake. And is that
Yep.
what kind of things are you doing to help teach people? I mean, you've written books, I think, haven't you? And you have a podcast.
Yep. Yeah, I'm writing books and I do podcasts. My podcast is Imagifestor Central, IMAGIFESTOR. It's at Imagifestor, the number 1, on YouTube. I've written the first book in the nonfiction series, which is Rise in Lucidity and Master Anxiety. Presently nearing conclusion of the edits on the second book in that series, which is Master Your Mind and Ascend. I've also written Half. It's a 6-book series of literary erotic fantasy, in which featuring very sexy vampires, but they go through every one of them near-death experience when they are transitioned to being vampire, and so they have this broadened identification of who and what they are that allows them to have what looks like to us to be kind of supernatural powers, but they call them hypernatural because they are actually our inheritance of our godly estate. And because they're very telepathic and some of them empathic, they can really feel each other's feelings. It's taught throughout the course of the story. The characters have to learn to use their attention to focus away from their own feelings when they don't want other empaths around them to pick up on what they're feeling and thinking. When they want to shield their thoughts, how would a telepathic soul around other telepathic souls and empathic souls, how would you shield your thoughts? So this teaches you how to do that. It teaches you a whole bunch of other little things that are it's very entertaining while you're enjoying the story, while you're learning these concepts. And that's called the Vampire Grail Affairs. There are 6 books in the series, 5 of which are written. Only first 3 are published so far. I hope to get books 4 and 5 done in 2025 and 2026. And I have my autobiographical story, The Fiddler's Laughing Bride, which I'm still working on finishing up. I hope that it should be done in 2025. All of this is published to my web store, crackedpotpublishing.com, where you can also sign up for coaching sessions with me, so I can help you observe the places where your self-talk is creating your own misery, and coach you on disidentifying from the self-talk and becoming the observer chooser. So you begin to have an experience of your godly estate and to realize the truth of what you are. You are consciousness itself, conscious of itself. And, I regularly have people say to me, what would I be? Who would I be? They say, who would I be if I didn't have my identity as this victim thing that happened to me? Who would I be? And my response is always the same. It's not who you would be. It's what you will be. You will be free. You will have disentangled yourself from identification with a temporary character that's not even really real. And as soon as you start exercising your godly estate to change your subjective experience and re-choose your story, change your timeline, okay, you realize an experience of yourself as consciousness itself, conscious of itself, instead of being trapped in misery because of your self-talk and the conditioning of the world that has taught you to believe you're this little ineffectual character under constant threat of loss and death. So that's all the things I do. You can get coaching with me. You can read my books, and you can watch my podcast, Imagifestor Central, where I put up a lot of free lucidity-inducing videos. They're usually about 30 minutes long. And you can go there and ask questions about Rise. If you read the book, Rise in Lucidity and Master Anxiety, you can ask questions in any of the videos down in the comments, and I will do a video to address your questions, or at least answer you there for any additional nuances you need help with. So yeah, that's my mission.
So with your coaching, do you call yourself like a spiritual coach, a life coach? What do you call yourself?
Sometimes I call myself a cognitive spiritual coach, a lucidity coach, but people don't usually know what lucidity is until I define it for them. And it's abiding as the observer of your self-talk, and the chooser of your self-talk is lucidity in the dream of the world. So yeah, usually a lucidity coach or a cognitive spiritual coach. I do tarot readings for people to get insights in what they're not consciously facing in themselves and to what's going on in their life. So a lot of times when I start with a new client, the first couple of times I'll do a tarot card reading to get an idea of what's going on with them, so that then we can begin to work on their self-talk and change their identification away from the self-talk itself. And I think that answered it.
Mm-hmm.
I get on a roll.
So is there one final word you'd like to leave with the audience before we close out?
I love you very much. I know I love you. I remember how much I loved you from the lustrous vast. All of you. No one was left out of that. You have to understand that in order to experience your bliss of who you really are, you can't leave anyone out of your forgiveness. If you leave someone out of your forgiveness and you make a judgment against them, then you're going to exclude yourself from the bliss that you want. So I urge you to drop your grievances, drop your desire to be vindicated. It's not who you are. It's not serving you. It's making you miserable. It's creating every bit of the discord in the world. And you have the power to choose otherwise. And it really doesn't matter whether I agree with your past thinking or not. That's not who you are. You are the consciousness who just, in your fear and anger and whatever, in your pain, you've talked yourself into identifying with this story. And you've identified with the mind full of the story that's attacking your peace. And if you want out of that, I know we all do. We all just want to get along. I want to go back to the days when we had Sunday football and cookouts together and disagreed lovingly and helped each other. You know, didn't matter. A storm came through and knocked a tree down in your neighbor's yard. Didn't matter who they were in support of. You were out there helping each other. There was much more love in the world. And I know we all want that. And you can't get to that loving situation through ignoble means. There are no ends so noble that they justify ignoble means to attain them. You can't get there from that. You can't do a whole bunch of bad stuff now and have a good outcome later. You're doing the bad stuff to get a good outcome. It just doesn't work that way. The stuff you're doing creates the outcome. You can't get a good thing out of hate. You can't get a good thing out of fear. That's not, unless it's consciousness. And you then stop the hating and stop the fearing and disidentify with the self-talk that is sabotaging us all. All we need to do is become conscious. And that's my job, to help you become lucid, make you conscious, and you will rise, you'll fly all on your own. It'll be your liberation, our liberation. And I hope you'll consider joining us all in that. Let's work together to make this world the loving place we all really want. Our heart's desire, I would say, even the conscious desire of most of us is that love. It's the unconscious desire of a small fraction of us, about 30 to 35% of us. It's our unconscious desire for that love. And we're just identified with all the hateful, angry means, frightened means that we think we have to engage in order to create what we seek, what those people secretly want, and that is love. Everybody wants the same thing. Everybody here is made of love. That's all that's real. That is what God is. God is love, and that's all that's here. Love. And you are an extension of God, having a dream of being separated, exiled from heaven, where you are, even now, if you would just learn how to wield your will and your attention.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
It was great to be here, Jay. I hope you got something out of it, brother.